What is that thing? It looks like a zapper.
It's a recorder.
I have a mini version of that.
Yeah, I remember you used it at the table read.
Yeah. That thing looks like it would kill you.
Because you can plug in like intense audio cables.
Oh, wow. Okay, got it.
Okay. So we wanted to know a little bit about your family's origin. When did they come to the United States?
Wow. You're talking to somebody that doesn't really have those facts.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to guess, I would say that I am 1, 2, 3, 4 generations. My family is part Italian, part English, Austrian, and Russian. So that's where it comes. And they entered Ellis Island, I assume, someplace in the 1900s, right around 1910, I would assume. I don't know for a fact, but I do remember that kind of ether of meeting them. And when I was a kid, they were really old. So, and they had already lived one full lifetime, while I was a child. So when I think back about who they were, I'm pretty, well, my mother's pretty dramatic, but my father was pretty interesting, actually. He had a lot of character. I mean, DNA really has a lot to do with who you are, which I find to be fascinating. And here's a picture of my grandfather and grandmother, not my great-grandmother. I mean, we're talking about their parents that would actually be here. But it was, God, if I can find this picture. I actually have a lot of pictures in here, which you guys will be like, oh my God. My picture of my mother, my grandmother, some Playboy pictures, some reality pictures, children. Here's my mother and my mother's mother. That was someplace in 1940, 1945, I would assume.
Already got it.
Okay, and this was my mother when she was really young. She doesn't even look like that today.
Okay.
And I found that to be really interesting. This is, let me see here. I have so many pictures that, but what I'm really looking for is this shot that sets the stage for who I really am, and I didn't even know it. Here's my mother in 1970.
Oh, cool.
Right?
She looks like Joe Didion or something.
She was a character, she's kind of, Icon is an unofficial version of me mixed with all the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So most important thing, I don't know if you all know this, that everybody in Icon, all the names are my family backwards.
Right.
So that's a real interesting thing. So Max and Ann were really my grandparents. Giuseppe is really me. Carol's really Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Nikki's, Nikki, but they all go backwards. And then as we go back to Domino and Giuseppe, that goes back to the people that actually came before they changed their name. So, I mean, there is some slight realism to the movie. I just took dramatic appeal to force it in a different direction. What's really funny is my mother, for my whole life, has said, why don't you write a movie about our family? Why don't you write this crazy story? And I'm not a comedy writer like you. I mean, I get what you write, the girls and I get it. I've been surrounded by comedy my whole life, and even though I am funny at times, I don't write comedy. I write linear movies that tell a story and bring out something. And this movie is as funny as you can get if you really look at the Carol when you meet my family, you'll be like, I mean, a lot of the scenes that happen in this movie has happened in my life. So I just twisted it into fiction. More important, I wrote this scene this morning, and to put Treese in one of the scenes for Icon, where Carol's in New York, and we just get back from Memphis, and she's in acting class, and she takes home the guy. Well, the next morning we see Nikki leave the door, and she's 6 years old, and she comes back from school, and you see her get off the bus and walk up the stairs and jiggle the knob, and nothing happens, and she turns the key and goes inside, and mom, nothing. She goes to the refrigerator, opens it up, and there's nothing but some milk in there and some cookies and a loaf of bread. And she's like, okay, and pours herself some milk and sits down and kind of is like, wow, what do I do now? And all of a sudden she hears rumbling, and she hears somebody, and she's like, Mom, and she runs into the room, opens up the bedroom door where Carol's on her bed. On her bed is nothing but Harper's Bazaar and Vogue and LA Times, and she's on the phone talking to her girlfriend, and Nikki's sitting at the door, and she's looking in, and she just doesn't know what to do. And she's not being acknowledged, and she's looking at this vision of this person who's just gallivanting, trying to basically cover herself in all these magazines and what's out there. And Carol finally realizes that she's standing there, and she's like, I have to go. My daughter came in, and she hangs up the phone, and you think she's gonna go, honey, come here, how was your day? And she goes, Nikki, can you come here a second? Will you make me a sandwich? And and Nikki's like, yes, okay, I'll do that, and she goes, and don't forget some milk. And she walks out the door shuts, she picks up the phone, calls up the friend again, and Nikki goes and sits at the chair and just kind of stares out there and wonders what the hell is going on, which is a 6-year-old child. So later on, when you see that she's been, when she's in a mental institution, I mean, that's the genesis for not knowing what love is. So I thought it was a great scene.
Are you saying that that's kind of based on your own experiences?
I had that experience, but maybe not to that not
Right.
that dramatic. But my mother was very New York and very, very cosmopolitan, and she had all the magazines and papers and always on the phone and blah 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 blah. And so I was always, my sister and I always laughed at it. But that I just took that and kind of made it dramatic effect. I mean,
Right.
Obviously. That did not happen, but similar, So, but when it runs, nobody's gonna know. Here, this is my grandfather and grandmother. I mean, their parents came into Ellis Island, so they were born here. And I mean, characters, and there's one more that. I chose musical DNA because I thought musical DNA would transfer to the human race collectively. If this movie, if we're done with Icon, the most important thing about this movie is that the human who watches it is going to ask themselves who their ancestors were, where they came from, why they became who they are, where their DNA has collected, so that they could get where they're going or where they are. And that means being the best that you are or the worst that you are. That means being an alcoholic, a drug addict, or or a deadbeat, or being, the greatest thing that ever happened, where you're Obama and being the president, or not being the president. This is me giving a speech, you have here, in front of 1,000 people. And I mean, actually going through all my pictures and telling the story is probably more interesting than this book. Because I mean, my pictures. Here's my ex-wife.
Yeah.
I shot that picture. I'm happy to have shot that picture. She doesn't look like that today. It's me after The Amazing Race. Funny. Okay. Okay.
I was just going with it.
Tough audience. Jeez. Me in another lifetime? Okay. All right. Now that we've broken the ceiling, let me see if I can find this last picture before me in front of all the paparazzis. You know, when I was doing
So what kind of things have you learned about your ancestors that you felt like have been important for you to help you discover what kind of a person you are when you're, talking about how that's what you want people to take away from Icon the movie?
my generation. My thirst is only 2 generations. My thirst comes from my mother. My mother loved the movie industry. My mother loved the things that I love. Unfortunately, when you're too much alike, you don't have the greatest relationship with the people that you're the most alike with. You have the best relationship with the people that understand you the most. The way I describe my family and my immediate family was like Mercury. And when Mercury breaks apart, it's still Mercury. And when it comes together, it's just a bigger piece of Mercury. So it's a bigger piece of energy. So my passion, my thirst, and my love comes from the movie industry, from my mother, for 100%. Because she always had a good eye, a good beat. The scene in Icon where she's in acting class, that was my mother. I mean, she didn't come from Memphis, she came from a different place, and I was the one sitting on the stage, not Nikki. So, I took a lot of my own experiences to make that movie, where when you look at Fate, that was, that's much more ethereal, that's much more outside myself. That's why I was so pissed when we did the table reading and it just didn't work, and I was like, God damn, this didn't work. And I was like, no, it was just long. It was good, but it was long. I knew what needed to happen. And when we took it away and brought it back, and I worked it, and I could not figure out 10 years that this movie took to write, and to get, different versions, different things, and I'm really proud of this movie. I believe that it's a great movie, that people are going to go to it, they're going to find love in it, they're going to find sophistication, passion, and when he becomes the rock star, I think they're all going to find that rock star in themselves. Because they're going to go home and they're going to really appreciate where they got their greatness from. Because everybody has greatness, and greatness comes from something, and you have to give it to get it. So I think that in answer to your question, it's not 3-dimensional. I'm giving the 3rd dimension generation to Treese. I give her the power, just like in the movie when Carol shows up and says, I'm going to give you something, I'm going to give you the power. I gave her the power. If you ask her, I tell her every day of her life, I gave you the power. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? It's a big responsibility. But until you define what you're going to do with it for yourself, you're not going to know what to do with it for anybody else. And that's even for a 6-year-old, And so, but when you go past my mother's generation and you go to the first 2, because there's my mother, there's me. Let's define who our generations are. There's me, my sister, my mother, with no father, but he was a character, He was a character. He had a lot of energy, and I probably, once again, attribute the DNA of him, her, and them to who I am without even knowing it. So what I know isn't important. It's who I am that's important. And how I got here isn't important. It's how I found my way here that's important. And with the help of being tortured or given a gift or, you know, or being, you know, not having a normal upbringing. No, what's normal? Normal today is the abnormal, because today the family, hello, we're talking. So everything that we have today in terms of that family, that white picket fence, that's the abnormal today.
Mm-hmm.
There's more people that are single parents today than there are actual families. There's, you know, so we have to take into account what to do with where we are today versus where they were in the 70s versus where they were in the 30s versus where they were when they came over, you know, Ellis Island. I tried to do that in the movie. And I keep trying to bring this back because I did try to parallel what I think I know.
Mm-hmm.
I always say what I think I know because I might not know that much.
Right.
And then so my generation that I understand was the dysfunction of Carol.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that way that you were brought up, did that make you grow up really fast?
When you live in New York, you grow up really fast. I grew up in New York City, so on the streets of New York, Treese is growing up really fast because she's in Hollywood, you know, but not nearly as fast as I grew up. I mean, when I was 9, I was 20, 18. When I was 11, I was 22, 23.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I caught up to myself when I was 29, and then I was 29 until I was 49. So, you know, I mean, time and age is about the destiny that you seek. And it stops when you get there, because that's when you mature to that point.
What destiny do you seek?
Exactly where I am today. I'm trying to do what this movie, these 2 movies represent my whole entire life in a nutshell. I've done everything around it, for it, reality television. I've written, you know, different types of books, television shows, but nothing was good enough for me to become me.
Mm-hmm.
These are good enough for me to become me and allow me to do what I've been trying to do since I was 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I attribute that to my mother because she didn't want to do what I wanted to do, and she doesn't understand anything about what I'm doing, but she understands the business of movies.
Right.
You know, she understands acting, she understands what she sees, what she loves, and what has driven her whole life. So we both live in our own delusional world, but just in different aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. So your mother was interested in the movie industry. What did she do? She wasn't in it
She
herself.
wanted to be an actor.
She wanted to be an
She wanted to be an actor, and then she became, you know, a craftsman of it. And so she never, she worked through it. You know, she's had her moments on the set and below the line, and she kind of looked for her place and never really found her place. So it became just the love that most people. Some people go teach at that point. Some people go and write about it. Some people, but you know, it's very hard to get to this moment. And my moment won't be defined until the movie's done. It's either going to be a great movie, or it's not going to be a great movie, and it will just be a movie that gets put out there. I believe everything starts with the page, and I believe that being on the page sets the tone for everything, and we've gotten away from that in this day and age where movies are written very loosely and then they're directed a little bit tighter, and the actors don't really understand where their place is today because it's not written as tight. I overwrote Icon for a reason. Everyone said, you know, all the agents and the craftsmen and the actors, well, not the actors, everybody but the actors. They said, why write such a long script? Because I'm interested in, if I was not directing it, for the director to know what the cues are to direct, for the actors to understand what to take from that moment and do with it, and because that's what a writer does. I mean, I write with somebody else because I know what I'm good at. I'm the storyteller. I talk about the arc of the characters. I talk about the infrastructure of the scenes, and then we get together, and then together he and I break it down so that it webs from one scene to the other, and then it shadows. It's kind of like producing a still shot where you're actually lighting it, and then you're actually seeing it as just one. And
Is that how he writes music?
I don't know.
It's in your mind. He has to come from somewhere.
You mean the rock star?
The rock star. Is that how he writes music?
No, he
That
wrote his
detail?
music based on a folder
Yeah.
that of his ancestors writing it. He is talented through DNA. Max, the character of Icon, is talented through DNA, and he doesn't discover himself until he understands who his family was and why he has that DNA. And that DNA comes to light with this folder of music that his whole family worked on and became successful, that he didn't know about until he was 17 years old. And when he saw it, the light went on, he understood what to do with it. And because of his prodigy and his musical DNA, he was able to take that and rework what was once Elvis Presley, or famous like Elvis Presley, to which was the disco era, which was Nicky. And he's able to take these songs and he's able to project them into the grunge world and make them. He doesn't rewrite them to be the same songs. He rewrites them to be his own. And so you get 4 different songs. You get one song which represents Johnny in the 60s. You get another song to represent Nicky in the 70s. And then you get 2 songs that represent Max as the rock star. With the blues, he takes his heritage, he takes the music, and he takes who he is, and he makes these songs. And these songs are they're not engineered pop, but they're blues. Icon was loosely written off of the relationship between Steven Tyler and his father, who was a music teacher. So his father taught piano and was a music teacher, and so he was able to take that and do something with that wherever he got the bug. Same thing with Trees. I'm giving her music because I believe that she's talented. I believe that she's going to be a force to be reckoned with because of my talent, because of who I am, because of what my mother gave to me and what DNA I have. I'm assuming she's going to have. If she doesn't have it, then she's going to be filled with a lot of wisdom.
And you said that you've known that you wanted to do this since you were 11. Like, how did you know at that early age that you wanted to make movies?
It's like falling in love. You just love what you love, and then you kind of follow that path and hope that you're right. And when you fall in love, it's never about the money. It's never about anything except the journey. And I have always loved this business.
What was the first movie that really affected you?
Oh wow! I was just thinking about your last question before I just really.
You can keep going on that one.
I've loved this business since I understood it to be, because it taught me so much. It taught me about places, people, things, characters, stories, whether they were make-believe or they were real. Before reality television came in, I loved when they would do James Bond movies and they would actually go to different locations and we would actually be able to feel what it was like to be in a different place. I mean, when you're a child, you're stuck where you are, except when you go to the movies. And I know a lot of people, Hugh Hefner, one of them, who had the same experience. I mean, there's many people that have gone and were so affected by the movies that they couldn't shake it, not because they were movie stars, but because of the experiences that they were actually able to have in the movies themselves. And, for me it was a shared thing with my mother, a shared place to be. Whether it was scary or whether it was fun, it was the place that I always knew that I would be. I always knew I'd be in California, and I always knew I'd be making movies, and I never stopped, and I never gave up, ever. And that's the reason why we're here, is because I had a passion, and, you know, I've written many scripts, many television shows, but I've always twisted and turned and tweaked in order to get it to the point where I wanted to arrive with myself. And that's what we're about to do. This interview is a little bit too premature to really be doing. I would like to be doing this after the movie's done, and I can actually say that I actually did it, because up until doing it, you don't know what that is. You don't know what to do until you actually do it. And, you know, that's why I wanted to make the documentary about this. And maybe this will turn into a documentary. Maybe this book, maybe you'll get to do exactly what you want to do, and maybe the book isn't what we're supposed to do. Maybe we're supposed to do the documentary. Maybe Jake is supposed to do the streaming, and that's a different thing. Because maybe this is really interesting. Because I find it to be really interesting as I'm talking about it, you know, and maybe we'll get a good story. Maybe it will be that interesting. And when we put it out, I mean, because I've gotten chills more than once as we're kind of talking about yesteryear, and we're kind of merging the two together back and forth. And if we can put a story together, then maybe this is more important than the actual stills. I don't think you can tell this in stills. And but after the fact, when I've actually made the movies, that's when I really want to say, hey, I can't believe I did it. But this is a team effort. It's just my vision. There's a lot of people it takes to make everything come together. But as Warren Beatty said, not a democracy. It's never going to be a democracy in order to make something happen. And when he said that to me, a light bulb went on in the back of my head, and I always knew it, but I always thought I had to be fair. And I don't believe that anymore. I believe that you have to rise with your own convictions and fall with the same convictions. And that's the responsibility that I'm taking in this industry, whether it's the agents, the managers, whether it's the studios, the money. You know, I'm going to rise and fall with those convictions, and either I get everybody to jump on the train and we all move it forward and let everybody be happy with the position that they have and be the best that they can be, or get off the train. It's that simple. So,
is there ever any times where you feel like
Just a second, let's pause for a second.